Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Leah moved silently through the dimly lit corridors of her family's castle, the weight of a secret too heavy to bear gnawing at her every thought. The cold stone walls, usually comforting in their familiarity, now seemed to press in on her, as if they too were conspiring to trap her in the reality she had just uncovered. Half human, the words echoed in her mind, impossible and undeniable at the same time. She was supposed to be one of them, a noble of the highest demon bloodline. Her father, Lord Malakar, ruled with an iron fist over both the demon elite and the human slaves who served them. And yet, Leah was not wholly one of them. She was half of something else. Something that the demons despised, something that they crushed under their feet every day. Humans. She stopped before the mirror at the end of the hall, her breath catching as she stared at her reflection. Pale skin, violet eyes, silver hair, all the markers of her demon heritage. But now, knowing what she did, she could see the human in her. The subtle softness of her features, the warmth in her gaze that no other demon possessed. It had always been there, hidden beneath the layers of privilege and power she had inherited. But now, it was unmistakable. Her mother's face. Leah clenched her fists at her sides, her mind racing. How could her father have kept this from her? How could he have loved a human, only to enslave them? The questions buzzed like angry hornets in her head, and she knew there was only one way to find the answers. She had to leave the castle. She had to go to the humans. Slipping past the guards was easy. Leah had spent her entire life in this fortress, and she knew its secrets better than anyone. The night was dark and cool as she crept out into the open, the moon casting long shadows across the barren lands that stretched beyond the walls. In the distance, the human villages lay huddled in the valley, tiny flickers of light barely visible from her vantage point. She had never been there, never been allowed to. But now, that was about to change. Leah pulled the hood of her cloak over her head and began the long trek down the hill. Every step felt like a betrayal, to her family, to her people. But it was nothing compared to the betrayal she had felt when she learned the truth of her bloodline. She had to know more. She had to understand what it meant to be human. As she approached the outskirts of the village, Leah could see the shapes of the small wooden huts, each one a testament to the human struggle to survive under the oppressive rule of the demons. They lived in squalor, forced to give up their strength, their magic, to keep the demons in power. She had always known this, of course. It was how the world worked. But now, with the knowledge of her mother's blood in her veins, it felt different. It felt personal. Leah hesitated at the edge of the village, her heart pounding. Would they recognize her? Would they turn her away if they knew who she really was? She pulled the hood lower and stepped forward, her feet carrying her toward the first hut she saw. The door creaked open before she could knock, and a tall, broad-shouldered man appeared in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he took in her figure. "What do you want, demon?" he growled. Leah's heart lurched. I need to speak with someone," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stepped closer, and Leah caught the glint of a dagger in his hand. "You shouldn't be here," he warned. "You're not welcome." "I know," she said quickly. "I'm not here to harm anyone. I need answers." He studied her for a long moment, the tension between them thick in the air. Then, without a word, he stepped aside, allowing her into the dimly lit hut. Leah's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she could see that the inside was just as sparse and worn as the outside. A few pieces of crude furniture, a fire burning low in the hearth, and a small table with a single chair. "Sit," the man said gruffly. Leah obeyed, her fingers trembling as she clasped them in her lap. The man remained standing, watching her with a wary gaze. "You're a noble, aren't you?" he asked, his voice softer now, though no less suspicious. She nodded. "I am, or I was. But things are different now." He raised an eyebrow. "Different? How so?" "I found out the truth. About myself. About what I am." He didn't speak, waiting for her to continue. "I'm not just a demon," Leah said, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. I'm half human." The man's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, Leah thought he might attack her. But instead, he sank into the chair across from her, his expression unreadable. "You're lying," he muttered. "The demons would never. My mother was human," Leah said firmly, her gaze meeting his. "She was one of you." Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. The man stared at her for what felt like an eternity, then finally spoke. "If what you say is true, then why are you here? What do you want from us?" Leah took a deep breath, the weight of her mission settling on her shoulders. "I want to help you. I want to free you." He laughed bitterly. "And how do you plan to do that? You, a half-demon, are going to free us? From your own people?" Leah flinched at the harshness of his words but held her ground. "I know it sounds impossible, but it's the truth. The demons have been lying to us all. They've been suppressing your power, keeping you weak so they can maintain control. But you're not weak. You have magic, just like they do. You just need to awaken it." The man's gaze hardened. "Even if that's true, how are we supposed to fight them? They've had control for centuries. We're barely surviving as it is." Leah leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "That's why I'm here. I can help you. I know their magic, their weaknesses. Together, we can overthrow them." He didn't respond right away, his brow furrowed in thought. Leah could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that came with the idea of rebellion. But she also saw something else, a flicker of hope. Finally, he spoke. "You'll need more than just me to pull this off." Leah smiled, her heart lifting for the first time since she had discovered the truth. "I know. But it's a start." The next few days passed in a blur as Leah worked to gain the trust of the humans in the village. Darius, the man she had first encountered, quickly became her closest ally. He was skeptical at first, but as Leah demonstrated her knowledge of both demon and human magic, he began to see the potential in her plan. Together, they traveled to neighboring villages, spreading the word of the rebellion. Leah used her connections in the demon world to gather information on weak points in their defenses, while Darius trained the humans in the art of combat. It wasn't long before they had a small but determined army, ready to fight for their freedom. Leah stood at the edge of the forest, watching as the humans trained with makeshift weapons and practiced their newly awakened magic. It wasn't much, but it was more than they had ever had before. And it was enough to give them a fighting chance. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Darius approaching, his expression grim. "We're ready," he said quietly. "But it won't be easy. Malakar won't let this go without a fight." Leah nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I know. But we don't have a choice. This is our only chance." Darius placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "We'll follow you, Leah. You've given us hope. We believe in you." Leah swallowed the lump in her throat, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never expected to find allies among the humans, let alone lead them in a rebellion. But now, as she stood on the brink of war, she knew that this was her destiny. She was not just a demon, nor just a human. She was both, and she would use that to bring down the walls that had divided them for so long. The night of the attack was cold and silent, the air thick with anticipation. Leah and Darius led their small army through the shadows, avoiding the demon patrols that guarded the outskirts of the castle. The plan was simple: strike at the heart of the demon's stronghold, take out Malakar, and dismantle the system of oppression that had kept the humans enslaved for centuries. But Leah knew that nothing was ever simple when it came to war. Leah's heart raced as they approached the massive stone fortress, its towering spires cutting into the night sky like the talons of a beast. The air was thick with tension, the weight of what was to come pressing down on her chest. She glanced at Darius beside her, his face set in a determined grimace as he led the group of humans through the dense underbrush. They had managed to stay undetected so far, but that wouldn't last once the real fight began. Ahead, the gates of the castle loomed large and impenetrable. The demons inside had ruled with cruelty for centuries, and Leah knew her father would not hesitate to crush this rebellion at its first sign. But this was their only chance. The humans were ready, their hidden powers now fully awakened and burning in their veins. They just needed the right moment to strike. Leah's thoughts turned to her father, Lord Malakar. The man who had raised her to believe that humans were beneath them, mere tools for the demon's power. The father who had kept the truth of her mother's identity hidden, shaping Leah's life with half-truths and lies. Facing him now would be more than just a battle for freedom. It would be a reckoning for everything he had taken from her, and from the world. She turned to Darius, her voice low and steady. "We need to get inside without raising an alarm. Once we're in, we'll head straight for the throne room. Malakar will be waiting there." He always knew this day would come. Darius nodded, tightening his grip on his sword. "And when it does, we'll be ready." Leah led the group toward a hidden entrance she had discovered long ago, back when she had still been a child of the castle, wandering its halls with innocent curiosity. It was a passage only known to those of the demon nobility, and it would lead them directly into the heart of the fortress without alerting the guards. The group crept through the narrow, torchlit corridor, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick stone walls. Leah's pulse quickened with each step, the knowledge of how close they were to the final confrontation swirling in her mind. She could feel the presence of the castle's magic, a heavy, oppressive force that pressed down on her senses. But it wasn't just the magic that weighed on her. It was the knowledge that, in the end, she would face her father. And she wasn't sure if she was truly ready for that. The corridor opened up into a vast hall, its high ceilings and towering columns casting long shadows in the flickering firelight. Leah paused for a moment, listening for any signs of movement, but the hall was eerily quiet. "Too quiet. They know we're here," she whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows for any hint of danger. Darius stepped up beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "Then let them come. We're ready." Before Leah could respond, a loud crash echoed through the hall, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps. Demons, clad in dark armor and wielding glowing weapons, emerged from the shadows, their eyes fixed on the intruders. Leah drew her sword, the blade humming with magic as it sliced through the air. "Stay close," she called to the group. "We fight together." The demons charged, their weapons raised, and the hall exploded into chaos. Leah met the first demon head-on, her sword clashing with his in a shower of sparks. She could feel the power surging through her veins, the magic of both her human and demon heritage blending into something stronger, something unstoppable. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Leah fought with a precision and grace that belied her inner turmoil, her movements fluid and deadly. Around her, the humans fought with equal ferocity, their newly awakened powers giving them the edge they needed to stand against the demon soldiers. Darius was a whirlwind of steel, his sword cutting through the enemy ranks with deadly efficiency, but as the battle raged on, Leah knew this was just the beginning. Malakir would not send his strongest forces to fight in the halls. No, he would be waiting for her in the throne room, where the true fight would begin. As the last of the demon soldiers fell, Leah wiped the sweat from her brow and looked to Darius. "We need to move. This isn't over yet." Darius nodded, his chest heaving from exertion. "Let's finish this." They made their way deeper into the castle, the air growing heavier with each step. The magic that saturated the fortress was palpable now, a dark, suffocating force that seemed to pulse with every breath Leah took. She could feel the presence of her father, his power looming ahead, waiting for her. The doors to the throne room stood before them, massive and foreboding, etched with ancient runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Leah hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the door's cold surface. This was it. The moment she had been dreading, yet preparing for, ever since she had learned the truth of her bloodline. With a deep breath, Leah pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The throne room was vast, its high ceilings adorned with dark banners and symbols of demon power. At the far end of the room, seated on a towering black throne, was Lord Malakir. His presence was as imposing as ever, his cold eyes fixed on Leah as she entered. "So," Malakir's voice boomed through the chamber, low and menacing. "The prodigal daughter returns." Leah's grip tightened on her sword as she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not here to return, father. I'm here to end this." Malakir chuckled, the sound deep and mocking. "And this? You think you, a half-blood, can challenge me? You are nothing without the power I gave you." Leah's eyes narrowed, her voice steady and defiant. "You didn't give me this power. My strength comes from both sides of my bloodline. I'm not just a demon, and I'm not just a human. I'm something more. And that's why you're afraid." Malakir rose from his throne, his dark robes billowing around him as he stepped forward. "Afraid? You flatter yourself, child. You are a disappointment, a stain on our bloodline. And I will cleanse it, just as I should have done the day you were born." With a wave of his hand, a surge of dark magic shot toward Leah, the force of it crackling through the air. But Leah was ready. She raised her sword, the blade glowing with a brilliant light as it absorbed the attack. The magic of both her human and demon heritage surged through her, and she channeled it into her strike, sending a powerful wave of energy back at her father. The force of the blow knocked Malakir back, but he recovered quickly, his eyes burning with fury. "You dare defy me?" he roared, his voice shaking the very walls of the castle. Leah didn't hesitate. She charged at him, her sword raised high, and their blades met in a violent clash of power and steel. The room shook with the force of their battle, the air thick with the raw energy of their magic. Malakir fought with the strength of centuries, his dark magic swirling around him like a storm. But Leah was no longer the uncertain girl who had once sought his approval. She was a warrior now, and she fought with the determination of someone who had everything to lose, and everything to gain. Their battle raged on, each strike pushing them closer to the edge of their limits. But Leah could feel her strength growing, her power surging as she embraced both sides of her bloodline. She was not just her father's daughter. She was something more, something greater. With a final, powerful strike, Leah drove her sword through Malakir's chest, the blade glowing with the combined magic of both her human and demon heritage. Malakir's eyes widened in shock, his body convulsing as the energy coursed through him. Leah stepped back, watching as the dark magic that had sustained him for so long began to unravel, his form dissolving into nothingness. It was over, the throne room was silent, the oppressive weight of Malakir's presence lifted at last. Leah stood there, her chest heaving with exhaustion, her sword still glowing faintly in her hand. She had done it. She had defeated him, but the victory felt hollow. The cost had been high, and Leah knew that the battle for freedom was far from over. Malakir's death was only the beginning. The demon's hold over the world would not crumble overnight, and the humans would need to fight for their place in the new order. Darius approached her, his face a mixture of relief and grief. "It's done," he said quietly. Leah nodded, her gaze distant as she stared at the empty throne. "Yes. But we still have work to do." Together, they left the throne room, stepping out into the dawn of a new era. The rebellion had succeeded, but the true challenge lay ahead. Leah knew that she would need to lead both humans and demons into a future where they could coexist. It would not be easy. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready. The bloodline had awakened, and with it, a new world had begun.